The chapel bell had not been rung in 4 years, and the Duke of Wexford was the only man at the Abbey who knew why. So when it rang at 11:30 on a night in late October, 3 thin, uncertain strokes, as if pulled by a hand that did not know its own strength, Julian Ashforth was already awake, already dressed, already standing at the window of his study with a glass of brandy he had not touched. He set the glass down. He listened. And when no fourth stroke came, he took a candle and went out across the dark courtyard himself, because he did not trust what he would find to anyone who answered to him. He found a child. She was perhaps 6 years old, curled on the stone step beneath the bell rope, and she was burning. He knew it before he touched her, knew it from the way the heat came off her small body into the cold chapel air, from the wet rattle of her breathing, from the way her eyes opened and did not see him at all. In one fist she held a small, carved bird, a robin. She would not let it go, even in her sleep. "Whose are you?" the Duke said. The child did not answer. She only turned her face toward the warmth of the candle and whispered a name that was not her own. He should have sent for the steward. He should have had her carried to the village, to whatever family had been careless enough to lose her, to whatever fever bed she had crawled out of, to find her way through his gates and up to his door. That was what his father would have done. That was, very nearly, what the standing order at the Abbey required. No petitioners at the door, no exceptions. The master is not to be disturbed. An order Julian had inherited 4 years ago, and had never once thought to lift. Instead, he gathered her up off the stone, bird and all, and carried her inside. That was the first wrong thing he did, by the reckoning of the man he had been that morning. It would not be the last. By 1 o'clock, the village physician had come and gone, leaving behind a grim face and a list of instructions that amounted to wait and pray and keep her cool and do not hope too hard. The fever would break before dawn, or it would not break at all. He could do nothing more. He bowed to the Duke with the stiff terror of a man who has never been inside such a house, and he left. The household wanted to take over. Mrs. Pell, the housekeeper, stood in the doorway of the small green bedroom with 3 maids behind her, and offered, very properly, to sit with the child through the night, so that his Grace might rest. "No," Julian said. "Your Grace, it is hardly—" "No," he said again, and something in his voice closed the matter. So they brought him a basin of cool water and clean cloths and a second candle, and they left him there, and they did not understand it, and neither did he. He had not sat at any bedside in his life. He had not held a single human being since he was 23 years old, since the night he pulled a stable boy out of a burning tack room and earned the white scar that still ridged the back of his left hand, and learned, in the cold weeks after, when no one thanked him and his father called it a reckless waste of a duke's son, that caring for a thing only taught you how much it cost to lose it. He had been very careful, for 12 years, to care for nothing. Now he wrung out a cloth and laid it against a stranger's child's forehead, and when she shivered, he gentled her. And when she cried out in the thin grey hours, he found himself talking to her. Low, steady, nonsense, the kind of murmur a man does not know he has in him until there is no one awake to hear it. The robin stayed in her fist. Some time past 3, he eased it loose to wipe her hands, and in the candlelight he saw the carving properly for the first time. The round breast, the copped head, the particular way the wingtip curled back on itself. He had seen that bird before. He could not think where. The fever broke at dawn. It broke the way the physician had said it might. All at once, a hard sweat, and then a sudden cooling. the rattle easing out of her chest between one breath and the next. Her skin went from fire to merely warm. And then, as the first grey light came through the green curtains, she opened her eyes. And this time, she saw him. "You're not Aunt Meg," the child said, with the flat honesty of the very young. "No," said the Duke of Wexford, who had not slept, whose back ached, whose throat was raw with 12 hours of murmuring. "I am not." "Where is she?" And the Duke realized that he did not know, that he had sat the whole night with a child whose name he had never asked, whose people he had never sought, who belonged to someone, an aunt, a Meg, who was very likely at this moment somewhere in the dark beyond his walls, going slowly out of her mind. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lily." "Lily what?" "Lily Hale." The name meant nothing to him. He was certain of it. He turned it over and found no purchase. And so it was with an easy conscience, the last easy thing he would feel for a long while, that he sent for his steward at 6 in the morning and said, "Find out who this child belongs to, and send word that she is safe." It took the steward until 9. When he returned, he came not with a name on a scrap of paper, but with a woman standing behind him in the doorway. And the look on the steward's face was the look of a man who has discovered something he would rather not have to say aloud. "Your Grace," he said, "the child's guardian, a Miss Margaret Hale, of the village. She is—" He hesitated. "She has been to the Abbey before." Julian rose from the chair he had not left in 10 hours, and he looked at the woman in the doorway. And the bottom dropped out of the morning. He did not recognize her face, but he recognized the shawl, an enormous grey thing, a man's by its cut, wrapped twice around her thin shoulders. Because he had seen it once before, 5 years ago, from this very house, through a rain-streaked window, on the back of a woman his own footmen were turning away from his door in a downpour, while he watched and did nothing because the standing order said no exceptions, and he had been too much his father's son to ask why she had come. She knew him too. He saw it land. She had come for her child, expecting to find her dead, and she had found instead the man who had once let her stand in the rain. Her name then, properly, Margaret Hale, 27 years old, schoolmistress to the village children 3 mornings a week, and seamstress the rest. Guardian for the past year to her dead sister's daughter. She did not curtsy when she came into the room. She crossed it, past the steward, past the Duke, as if neither of them existed. And she went to her knees beside the bed, and gathered the child up against the grey shawl, and pressed her mouth to the small fair head, and made no sound at all. Julian stood and watched a thing he had no name for. When at last she lifted her face, it was dry and fierce, and entirely without fear of him, which was itself a kind of accusation. "She went missing at dusk," Margaret said. "I have been walking the roads since. I came here last because I did not believe—" She stopped. She looked at the window. She did not finish the sentence, and her not finishing it was worse than anything she might have said. "I did not believe this house would take her in." "She was on the chapel step," Julian said. "She rang the bell. I have sat with her since." Margaret looked at him then with open disbelief, not at the fact, but at the man, as though he had told her the river had run uphill. "You sat with her?" "Yes." "All night?" "Yes." She held his eyes a moment longer than was proper, hunting for the lie in it, and then she looked down at the child, at Lily, who had fallen asleep again, with her aunt's thumb gripped in one hand and the wooden robin in the other. And Julian watched the disbelief in her face curdle into something far more dangerous to him, because it was not anger. It was confusion. The particular confusion of a person forced to hold two true things that cannot both be true. This is the man who turned me away to die in the rain, and this is the man who held my child while she burned. "I do not understand you," she said quietly. It was not a courtesy. It was a complaint. "Nor I myself," said the Duke.
The robin had slipped half out of Lily's grip. Margaret caught it without looking, the way a mother catches a falling thing, and tucked it back. And the candle, still burning though the sun was up, caught the curve of the carved wing. Julian's eyes went to it and stayed. "Where did the child get that bird?" he said. Something crossed Margaret's face. Caution, the drawing up of a person who has just felt a floorboard shift. "My father made it," she said. "Why?" "Your father." He came one step closer, and he was not aware he had moved. "Your father was a carver. A joiner, a master joiner." Her chin came up. "He carved half the good rooms in this county before his hands gave out. Why does it matter to you, Your Grace?" But Julian had crossed to the window already, because he could see from the green bedroom the grey roof of the chapel across the courtyard. The chapel he had carried the child out of 9 hours before, and he was thinking of the screen behind the chapel altar, the carved oak screen his father had commissioned the year before he died. The screen worked all over with leaves and birds, and one bird in particular, low on the right-hand panel, a robin with its head cocked and one wingtip curling back on itself, that he had looked at every Sunday of his boyhood, and never once thought to wonder who had made. "What was his name?" Julian said. "Your father." "Edmund Hale." And the Duke of Wexford, who had let this woman stand in the rain, understood that he had been in her debt for far longer than 5 years, and had never known it, and that the knowing was about to cost him a great deal. He did not tell her. Not that morning. That was the second wrong thing, though it did not feel wrong. It felt like mercy. The child needed to be carried home, and the woman needed to carry her, and a revelation dropped into that doorway would have served no one but his own conscience. So he had his own carriage brought round, over Margaret's stiff objection, and he handed her up into it himself. And the touch of her hand through her worn glove was the first touch he had permitted himself in 12 years that was not a fever child's. And he felt it travel the whole length of his arm. He noticed, against his will, which is the only way he noticed anything in those days, the ink stain on the side of her right forefinger. A schoolmistress's mark, or a clerk's. The hand of a woman who wrote. "You will send word," he said, "if the fever returns." "I will manage, Your Grace. I have managed worse." "That was not a question of whether you can manage." The words came out harder than he intended, and he saw her register the tone and brace against it, the way one braces against a raised voice, and he hated, instantly, completely, that she had learned to brace against him. "It was a request," he said, lower. "Send word, please." The please undid something in her composure. He saw it. She covered it by looking at the child in her lap, and the carriage pulled away down the avenue. And the Duke stood on his own steps in the cold and watched it go. And he did not understand himself at all. That afternoon he went into the chapel and knelt. Not to pray, he had given that up with everything else, but to look at the low right-hand panel of the screen. The robin was there, its wingtip curled back on itself. It was, to the line, the twin of the bird in the child's fist. Behind him, a voice said, "Your Grace should not trouble himself with the chapel furnishings." Silas Crail, his father's man of business and now his own, 54 years old, soft-footed, soft-handed, a man who had kept the Wexford ledgers for 20 years and whom Julian had retained without a second thought because his father had trusted him, and because the second thoughts of a duke are expensive. Crail stood in the chapel doorway with his hands folded, and his eyes were on the carved panel. And there was something in his stillness that Julian, even distracted, even half undone by a night without sleep, marked and filed away.
Who paid for this screen, Crail?
The late Duke commissioned it, Your Grace, the year before he died.
From whom?
A pause, the smallest pause. I should have to consult the accounts. Then consult them, said Julian, and bring me what you find. Crail bowed and withdrew, and the next morning he brought a single sheet, a fair copy in his own neat hand, showing the chapel screen paid for in full to a firm of craftsmen in the county town. No name, the sum modest, the account closed. It was a lie. Julian did not yet know it was a lie. But he had spent his life among men who told the truth and noticed, now, the particular smoothness of a thing too tidily closed. He kept the sheet. He did not say so. The fever did return. Not Lily's, who mended with the speed of the young, but a fever of a different kind, in the Duke himself, who found that, having broken 12 years of careful indifference for the span of one night, could not put itself back together. He told himself he called at the Hale cottage to assure himself the child did well. He called 4 times in 9 days. By the third call, even Mrs. Pell had stopped pretending to believe him. The cottage was small and clean and very poor. There was a single shelf of books, well read. There was a slate on the wall with the morning's sums still chalked on it, because Margaret taught the village children at her own table when the schoolroom was let to the church. There was, propped in the window where the light could reach it, a half-mended doll and a child's copybook in a careful, round hand. Lily Hale, her book. And beside the hearth, a work basket, and in the basket, the grey shawl, folded. And there was Margaret, who did not soften toward him, which he found he could not stop thinking about. You needn't keep coming, she told him on the 4th visit, on the step, not unkindly, but not yielding. She is well. You have done your Christian duty, and more. A duke does not call on a seamstress, Your Grace. The village has already begun to talk, and the talk will not fall on you. It was the truest thing anyone had said to him in years, and it stopped him cold. She was right. He, who had been raised from the cradle to think first of reputation and consequence, had not once thought of hers. A man of his rank calling repeatedly at the cottage of an unmarried woman, of no family. In the village's eyes, there was only one explanation for it. And it was an explanation that would cost her everything, and cost him nothing. His father's son would have known that on the first visit. I have been careless of you, he said slowly. Again. The again hung in the cold air between them. She heard it. Her eyes searched his face, and for the first time the fierceness in them flickered towards something else. You remember, she said, the rain. I remember a woman turned from my door. I did not know your name. I have learned it since. He made himself hold her gaze, though every instinct his father had drilled into him screamed to look away, to retreat behind the title, to let Your Grace do the work that Julian Ashforth could not. I did not give the order that day for cause. I gave it because my father had given it before me, and I had never troubled to ask whether it was just. I let you stand in the rain because asking would have cost me something. And I had decided, long before you came, to never again pay for anything. I am ashamed of it. I have been ashamed of very little in my life, and I find it does not suit me. Margaret Hale stood in her doorway and stared at him.
And the half-mended doll watched from the window. And somewhere behind her, Lily was singing tunelessly to the wooden robin. And the Duke of Wexford waited to be forgiven, the way a man waits to be sentenced. She did not forgive him. That was the thing that turned him, in the end, that she did not make it easy, that she would not hand him absolution the way her betters had handed her hardship all her life. My sister came that day, Margaret said. Not I. I was at home with the child, with Lily, who was a year old and whose father had just died, and whose mother, my sister Anne, had walked 3 miles in the rain to your door to ask for what was owed our family, and was turned away, and took a chill on the road home that she never truly shook. She died last autumn, Your Grace. The fever took what the rain began, 4 years late. So when you say you let me stand in the rain, no, you did not. You let my sister stand in it. I have only come to finish what she could not. The cold went all the way through him. What was owed, he said. You said what was owed. What was owed your family by mine? And Margaret Hale lifted her ink-stained chin and said, £180 for the chapel screen and the 2 robins and the long gallery panelling and the work my father did for the old Duke across 4 years and was never paid for, because the man who kept your accounts told him the money would come, and it never came. And my father died believing himself a bad provider, when in truth he had been robbed. I have his receipts, Your Grace, every one, in his own hand. I have kept them 7 years against the days someone in your house would consent to read them. She had the proof. She had had it all along. She had not come to his door 5 years ago, or sent her sister as a beggar. She had come as a creditor. Show me, said the Duke. Why, said Margaret. So you may feel the more wretched. I did not keep them for your comfort. Show me, he said again, so that I may pay my father's debt, and find out who told him not to. She made him ask twice. She was within her rights, but on the second asking, she went inside and came back with a packet wrapped in oilcloth, tied with a thread, and she did not hand it to him on the step. She made him come inside, into the small, clean room, and sit at the table where the children's sums were chalked on the slate above his head. And she untied the thread herself and laid the receipts before him, one by one. Her father's hand was strong and plain. The sums were modest and exact. The dates ran from 1809 to 1812. And against each one, in Edmund Hale's careful lettering, was a note of the promise made and the man who made it. Mr. S. Crail, on behalf of His Grace, to be paid at quarter day after quarter day, year after year, never paid. Julian read them all. The room was very quiet. Lily had fallen asleep against her aunt's side, the robin in her fist, and the late sun came through the window and lay across the slate and the half-mended doll, and the strong, plain receipts of a robbed and honest man. Crail showed me an account 3 days ago, Julian said at last, that said this screen was paid in full to a firm with no name. I knew it for a lie, and I did not know why. Now I know why. He looked up. He took it, all of it. For 20 years he has kept my father's books, and somewhere in them is the place where your £180 became his. And the chapel screen, with your father's robins on it, is the proof. Because he could not erase the work, only the name of the man who made it. He found that his hands were not quite steady, and he was glad, distantly, that they were not. Miss Hale, will you let me open the ledgers with these in my hand? They are my father's name, she said, not yours to spend.
Then come with me when I open them. Stand in the room. It is your account to settle, not mine. I will not have it said afterward that the Duke set it right out of his own goodness. He did not. You kept the receipts. You will be in the room. And Margaret Hale looked at him for a long moment, across the table where she taught other people's children to add. And something in her face gave way at last. Not softness. He would not have wanted softness, but the cautious beginning of belief. Stop, she said. Stop what? Apologizing. With your eyes, your hands, your 4 visits in 9 days. You have apologized enough, and it is not me you wrong the worst. It is a dead woman you cannot reach. So stop. She drew a breath. And tell me, plainly, what you intend to do. It was the moment he fell, though he did not say so for another month. Not because she had forgiven him, because she would not let him hide behind the apology. Because she required of him, as no one in his gilded life had ever dared, that he act. I intend, said the Duke of Wexford, to ruin Silas Crail. With you in the room. Tomorrow. He did it in the long gallery, the room Edmund Hale had panelled, and he did it with witnesses, which was the only way it would hold. He summoned Crail on a pretext, and he had the estate's solicitor present, and the magistrate, Sir Henry Carr, who happened to be the nearest justice and the greatest gossip in 3 parishes, which suited Julian precisely, because what is done before Sir Henry is done before the county by Sunday. And he had Margaret Hale seated, with her father's receipts in the oilcloth packet on her lap, and the carved robin set on the table before her, where the light could catch it. Crail came in soft-footed and saw the company, and understood, the way a fox understands a cleared wood, that something had changed. But he was 20 years practiced, and he composed himself, and he bowed. Mr. Crail, said the Duke, this is Miss Margaret Hale. Her father was Edmund Hale, joiner, who carved the panels you are standing beside, and the chapel screen, and the robins. You will remember the name. You wrote it often enough. Mr. S. Crail, on behalf of his Grace, to be paid at quarter day. He let the words fall one at a time. £180, Crail. Promised across 4 years and never paid. I have the receipts in this room. I should like you to explain, before Sir Henry, where the money went. The colour left Crail's soft face, but he was not finished. Men like him are never finished, while there is a single lie left in the bag. Your Grace, these are old village matters, a confusion of accounts, a craftsman's grievance. The man is years dead and cannot— The man is years dead, said Margaret Hale, rising, because he was robbed, and broke his heart over it, believing the fault his own. And she did the thing Julian had brought her there to do, the thing he had refused to do for her. She crossed to the table where Sir Henry sat, and she laid the receipts before the magistrate, one by one. Her father's strong, plain hand, the dates, the sums, and against every one of them the name Crail, Crail, Crail. And she said, in the clear, carrying voice of a woman who has taught restless children to attend, He signed the promise himself, sir, 12 times across 4 years. The Duke who is dead never knew. The Duke who is living did not know until I showed him. But this man knew. Every quarter day he knew, and every quarter day he kept my father's wages and let him die, thinking himself a failure. Read them yourself. The hand does not lie, even when the man does. Sir Henry read them. The gallery was silent enough to hear the fire, and the magistrate, who had come expecting a pleasant dinner and a duke's company, looked up from the receipts of a dead joiner at the man who had kept the Wexford books for 20 years.
and his comfortable face had gone to stone.
"Mr. Crail," Sir Henry said, "you will want a solicitor of your own." It was done, not by the Duke's hand, by hers, with his rank only the room she had been given to stand in. Crail was taken into the magistrate's charge that night. The ledgers, opened, gave up not £180, but the better part of 4,000, skimmed across 2 decades from craftsmen and tenants and tradesmen who had each, like Edmund Hale, gone away believing the fault their own. The Duke of Wexford had been robbed for 20 years, and had been too much his father's incurious son to notice. A seamstress with 7-year-old receipts had noticed for him. Across the gallery, as Crail was led out, Margaret Hale's eyes found Julian's. She did not smile, but she inclined her head once. The acknowledgement of one person who has done a hard thing to another, who has, at last, done his part. And the Duke of Wexford felt it more than he had felt anything in 12 years. He thought foolishly that the hard part was behind them. He was wrong, and the manner of his being wrong was his own fault, which by now will surprise no one. For in setting the account right, he had done it loudly, before the greatest gossip in 3 parishes, exactly as he intended. And the talk that rode out of the long gallery by Sunday did not stop at the Duke uncovered his steward's theft. It went on, as talk does, to, and who was the woman? The seamstress, in the gallery, seated, while a Duke ruined his own man of business on her account. By the following week, the village that Margaret had warned him of, the village whose talk she had said would fall on her and not on him, had reached the only conclusion it knew how to reach, about a Duke and a poor, unmarried woman. He learned of it when he called at the cottage, and found the door opened not by Margaret, but by the vicar's wife, stiff with virtue, and Margaret behind her, white-faced, and Lily nowhere to be seen. "They have said I am your—" Margaret could not say the word in front of the child's empty chair. "The school has dismissed me. The mothers will not send their children to a woman who— and the parish has written to ask whether Lily ought to remain in the care of a woman of my— Your Grace, you have settled my father's account and ruined the rest of me to do it. And I told you the talk would not fall on you." It was the cost, arriving exactly where the prompt of his own character had set it. On her, and through his own carelessness, the same carelessness that had let her sister stand in the rain. He had changed enough to set right an old theft. He had not changed enough, yet, to think of her reputation before his own satisfaction. The lesson she had been teaching him since the doorway came due all at once. "Then I will write to the parish myself," he began, "and tell them there is nothing, and they will believe a duke's denial of a poor woman exactly as much as you would expect," she said. "Which is to say, they will believe what is worse for me. There is no letter that mends this. You cannot, Your Grace, it away." Her voice did not break. That was the worst of it. "Please go. You have done enough good for one season. I cannot afford any more of it." And she closed the door. The Duke of Wexford stood on the step of the cottage, as he had once stood on the steps of his own house, watching a carriage carry her away. And he understood that there was exactly one thing that would mend it, and that it was the one thing his whole life had taught him to withhold, and that he was going to have to give it openly, irreversibly, before witnesses, at the cost of everything his father had built him to protect. He found he wanted to. That was the strangest discovery of all. He did not write a letter. He had learned at last what a letter was worth to a woman whose sister had walked 3 miles to deliver one in the rain. He came in person, on foot, through the village, in the middle of the market morning, when the whole place could see him. No carriage,
No footman, nothing of the title but the title itself, walking plainly down the public road to the cottage of a dismissed seamstress. The village watched. He meant it to. He knocked, and when Margaret opened the door with Lily on her hip and her face set against him, he did not step inside, because what he had come to say was not a thing to be said behind a door.
"Miss Hale," he said, loudly enough for the market to hear, "I have come to ask you to marry me, not quietly, not to mend your name with a private arrangement. I am asking you here, where every soul who slandered you can hear it, because the only thing that will answer their talk is the truth, and the truth is that I am not paying a debt, and I am not being kind. I am a cold man who sat one night with a sick child because I could not make myself put her down, and I have not been able to put either of you down since. I let your sister stand in the rain. I will spend my life standing in it with you if you will have me. And you may make me ask twice. You have every right. You have always had every right." "Stop," said Margaret Hale. He stopped. She looked at him. At the Duke of Wexford, standing coatless and plain in the market mud, with a whole village holding its breath. And Lily, on her hip, reached out with the wooden robin and pressed it, with great seriousness, against the burn scar on the back of his left hand, as though to mend it. "You are not asking twice," Margaret said. "Once is enough. It was always the asking I wanted, not the number of times." And then, low, only for him, "But you will never again decide a thing for me, without my standing in the room. Not my reputation, not my child, not my account. Say it. I will never decide a thing for you without you in the room," said the Duke. "On my life." "Then yes," said Margaret Hale. "Yes." The kiss, when it came, was in front of the entire market, which was the point. It was not gentle, and it was not careful. 12 years of carefulness went out of him at once, and somewhere to the left a fishwife cheered, and the vicar's wife went the colour of a beetroot, and Lily laughed, and the wooden robin fell into the mud, and was, a moment later, very seriously retrieved. They were married in the chapel, beneath Edmund Hale's screen, with the carved robin watching from the low right-hand panel, where it had watched over the Ashforths every Sunday for 7 years, without one of them knowing whose hands had made it. Margaret would not be married anywhere else. She had her reasons, and they were good ones, and the Duke had learned by then not to settle her reasons for her. It is a spring morning, some 18 months after the night the bell rang. The long gallery that Edmund Hale panelled is full of light. There is a new account book on the estate now, kept by an honest man, and a brass plate newly set into the chapel screen that reads simply, "Edmund Hale, joiner, of this county." Who made these? Margaret saw to the wording herself, and would not let Julian add a single flourish to it. Silas Crail was tried at the Spring Assizes, and transported for 14 years. He is somewhere on the far side of the world now, keeping, one imagines, somebody else's accounts, under a closer eye than he ever kept the Duke's. The Duchess of Wexford still has ink on the side of her right forefinger most mornings, because she teaches still. The village children come up to the abbey now, to the long gallery, and learn their sums beneath the panelling her father carved. And no mother in the parish would dream of keeping a child from the Duchess's table. The great grey shawl that was her father's hangs on a peg by the gallery door. She wears it when the mornings are cold. Julian has offered her cashmere, Norwich silk, anything she likes. She prefers the shawl. He has stopped offering. Lily is 8 and reads aloud badly and bravely, and calls the Duke Papa now,
which she began to do without asking anyone's permission one ordinary Tuesday, and which undid him so completely that he had to leave the room. And the wooden robin sits on the mantel of the green bedroom where a fever once broke at dawn, its wingtip curling back on itself, twin to the one in the chapel, a little chipped now, mended once with a child's clumsy glue, kept where the morning light can reach it. Sometimes, on the cold nights, the Duke of Wexford wakes and goes to look at it, the way a man returns to the place where his life turned over. He had sat with a dying child because he could not put her down. He had asked, at dawn, who she belonged to. The answer, it turned out, was to him. Though it took a robbed man's receipts, a fierce woman's refusal, and a whole village in the market mud to teach him the word for it. He does not stand in the rain any more. He stands in it with them.